Hello students, welcome to our online classes. I am Mrs. Nehal Mori and today we are going to learn chapter 3rd of history, the Delhi Sultans. I repeat again, the Delhi Sultans. Let's quickly begin with it. Chapter 3rd, the Delhi Sultans. In chapter 2, we saw that regions like Kaveri Delta became the center of large kingdoms. Did you notice that there was no mention of a kingdom with Delhi as its capital? That was because Delhi became an important city only in the 12th century. Till now, in chapter 1 and 2, we have never noticed Delhi as a capital, whereas we have noticed that Kaveri Delta was a center of larger kingdoms. Why? Because Delhi became important in the 12th century. Okay, take a look at table 1. Table 1 we will see where Delhi first became the capital of kingdom under the Tomara Rajputs, who were defeated in the middle of the 12th century by the Chauhans, also referred as the Chahamanas of Ajmer. It was under the Tomaras and Chauhans that Delhi became an important commercial center. Many rich Jain merchants lived in the city and constructed several temples. Coins were minted here called Delhi Wal and had wide circulation. Now, when did Delhi gain importance? Delhi gained importance in the reign of Tomara Rajputs and Chauhans. They created Delhi as their commercial center, and many Jain merchants lived in Delhi at that time, and they built many temples in Delhi. And also the coins minted in Delhi were called as Delhi Wal, and they were widely circulated in the kingdom. Now, the transformation of Delhi into the capital that controlled vast area of the subcontinent started with the foundation of Delhi Sultanate. Okay, the transformation of Delhi into the capital. How was Delhi transformed into the capital city? Okay, the transformation of Delhi into a capital that controlled vast area of the subcontinent started in the foundation of the Delhi Sultanate in the beginning of the 13th century. Take a look at the table of 1 again and identify the 5 dynasties. Now, which are the 5 dynasties who ruled Delhi and who considered Delhi as the capital? We are going to see. Okay, they made Delhi Sultanate. Now, quickly, let's see the 5 dynasties. Just a moment. Yes. Okay, these are the 5 dynasties. Now, first one here is a Rajput dynasty. Can you see a Rajput dynasty first ruled Delhi? Okay, the Tomaras were Ananganapala and Chauhan's king was Prithviraj Chauhan. Now here they have given the period when they ruled. That means Tomara's Ananganapala ruled in 1130 to 1145. Prithviraj Chauhan ruled Delhi in 1175 to 1192. Okay, these are the rulers of Delhi. After Prithviraj Chauhan, who ruled Delhi? See here, Turkish rulers were there: Kutubuddin Aybak, Shamsuddin Iltutmish, Razia, Ghiyazuddin Balban, and they ruled in these periods. Okay, next came the Khilji dynasty: Jalaluddin Khilji, Alauddin Khilji. Next came the Tughlaq dynasties: Ghiyazuddin Tughlaq, Muhammad Tughlaq, and Firuz Shah Tughlaq. After Tughlaq dynasty came the Said dynasty and Lodi dynasty, which were for shorter period. Khizr Khan ruled for 1414 to 1421, and in Lodi dynasty, Bahlul Lodi ruled in 1451 to 1498. So these are the 5 main dynasties who ruled over the Delhi. And who were the 5 rulers? Rajput, Turkish, Khilji, Tughlaq, Sayyid, and Lodi. Okay. Next, finding out about the Delhi Sultans. How do we know about the Delhi Sultans? From where do we know? As I have told you before, we learn from the archaeological whatever facts we get, whatever things we get from underground, whatever stones, inscriptions, whichever things we get, we learn about it, historians learn about it, and then they frame a history. Okay, although inscriptions, coins, and architecture provide us a lot of information, especially valuable are histories that are tariq. That means tariq is known as singular and twarik means plural, written in Persian, the language of administration under the Delhi Sultanate. Okay, now the Turkish people were mainly using Persian language. So at that time, Twarik or Tariq, that means a chronicle of a ruler, what king did, which kingdoms he defeated, what all rules he adopted in his kingdom, what all things he did for the beneficial of the people. These all things were mentioned in that chronicle or a Tariq or Twarik. And who wrote this Tariq? Who was the author of the Tariq? Of course, they were a learned men. That means they were knowledgeable person, right? The authors of this Tariq were learned men. The secretaries, administrators, the secretaries, administrators, poets, courtiers, who both recounted events and advised rulers on governance, emphasizing the importance of the just rule. They not only wrote about the king, they also gave advices about the how to govern the kingdom. They also provided advices to the kingdom. That means they played a very important role in the kingdom. Okay, who were these people who wrote the Tariq? They were secretaries, administrators, poets, and courtiers. That means they were very important people in the kingdom. So they lived in the Delhi only. This we will see later on. See now. Now, justice of circle. This is very, very important. One of a Tariq writer or the author of a Tariq, what he has written. See now, Fakr-e-Mudabbir wrote in the 13th century. What he has written, see, very important. A king cannot survive without soldiers. Very, very important and obvious that any king cannot survive without soldiers, right? Any soldiers cannot live without salaries. This is also very true. King is dependent on the soldiers. And why do soldiers work for the king? For the sake of salaries. Salaries, from where do the salaries come? Salary come from the revenue collected from peasants. Barabar hai na? King from where do the king get money? It doesn't come from the sky, right? He collects the revenue from the peasants, and from that money collected he rules or he governs his kingdom. But peasants can pay revenue only when they are prosperous and happy. When the peasants can happily pay the revenue, when they themselves have that amount to pay to the king. So it was very important that the peasants should be happy and they should have enough money. That means they should be prosperous. This happened when the king promotes justice and honest governance. And when the peasants will be prosperous and happy, when the king promotes justice, means he gives justice to them, and also he is honest in his governance. So ultimately the king depends on the peasants. So this is very important. King depends on the soldiers, soldiers depend on the salaries, and salaries of soldiers depend on the peasants, and again the peasants are depend on the king. So this is called a circle of justice. This wholly entirely is a circle of justice. Okay. Next, keep the following additional details in mind. The authors of Tariq lived in the cities. I have told you they were learned men, right? Such as secretaries, administrators, poets, courtiers. They will not live in the villages. Obviously, they will live in the cities. Okay, they lived in the cities. Mainly Delhi. They lived in the Delhi and hardly ever in villages. Yes, they often wrote their histories of Sultan in the hope of rich awards. Now, nobody will write anything bad about him in front of him, right? If a person is writing a chronicle of a king, he will not mention any bad things about him. He will always mention good things. He will over exaggerate it so that he will get a huge reward from the king. Okay, these authors advise rulers on the need to preserve the ideal social order based on birthright and gender distinctions. What is birthright and gender distinctions? This is given in your book also. Birthright means a privileges claimed on account of birth. For example, I'll tell you, people who believed nobles inherited their right to govern because they were born in certain families. A noble's child will again become a noble, a peasant's child will become a peasant, a merchant's child will become a merchant in future. That means they are born in the certain family, so they should do the certain jobs only. They were not allowed to go beyond that. So this is what a birthright. Because you are born in that family, you have that right to do so, right? And next was a gender distinction. This was very important point, gender distinction. What is the meaning of gender distinction? Social and biological difference between women and men. Social and biological difference between women and men. Usually this difference are used to argue that men are superior to women. Gender distinction was done so that they can prove that men are always superior to the women's. Okay. Now, a very good example is Razia Sultan. See, in 1236, Sultan Iltutmish's daughter Razia became Sultan. See, this is very important. Razia became Sultan. Being a woman, she became a Sultan. A chronicle of the age, Minhaj-e-Siraj. I have told you chronicle. Who is a chronicler? That means who writes about the king. So in that time, people were assuming that men are always superior than the women. So while he was writing about the Delhi Sultans, he was not ready to accept Razia as a sultan. So now let's see. The chronicler of the age, who was not ready? Minhaj-e-Siraj. He was writing about the sultan and he was not ready to recognize her as a sultan. Okay, the chronicle of the age, Minhaj-e-Siraj recognized that she was more able and qualified than all her brothers. But he was not comfortable at having a queen as ruler. She was more able. Razia Sultan, being a woman, she was more able and she was more qualified than all her brothers. But Minhaj-e-Siraj, who wrote a chronicler, was not comfortable. Why? Because she was a lady, just because she was a woman. Okay, not only him, the nobles, that means the courtiers who work in the kingdom, they were also not happy. So what happened? She was removed from the throne in 1240. That means she ruled from 1236 to 1240. Next, this is also an example. See what Minhaj-e-Siraj thought about Razia. Now, Minhaj-e-Siraj wrote a chronicler, right? What he thought about the Razia? Minhaj-e-Siraj thought that the queen's rule went against the ideal social order created by God. What he thought? That God has created men and women different, and women are supposed to be a subordinate. They are not supposed to be superior than men. They should work under men. Okay, women should work under men. They should not go superior to men. And God has made this rule. He therefore asked, in the registers of God's creation, since her account did not fall under the column of men, how did she gain from all her excellent qualities? Okay, so then he questioned God itself, that even though she was woman, how she had all the excellent qualities in her. Okay, on her inscription and coin, Razia mentioned that she was daughter of Sultan Iltutmish. This was in contrast to the queen Rudramadevi. She has inscribed the that thing, that she was a daughter of Sultan Iltutmish. When she inscribed the coins, when she minted the coins during the time when she was Sultan, she mentioned that she was a daughter of Sultan Iltutmish on the coin. Okay. And also there is another example of Rudramadevi. There is also a movie, South Indian movie of Rudramadevi. If everybody, I think everybody must have watched. Okay, so this was in contrast with the Queen Rudramadevi. Rudramadevi ruled in 1262 to 1289 of the Kakatiya dynasty of Warangal, parts of modern Andhra Pradesh. Rudramadevi changed her name on her inscription and pretended she was a man. Okay, she changed her name on the inscription and she pretended that she was a man. Okay, another queen, Didda. Another queen was known as Didda, ruled in Kashmir. And here is another queen lady ruler known as Didda, who ruled in Kashmir in 1980 to 1003. Her title is interesting. It becomes Didi. It comes from Didi. Didda comes from the word Didi, which means elder sister, and it was given by her subjects as a loved ruler. Okay. Now, here in the early 13th century, the control of Delhi sultans rarely went beyond heavily fortified towns occupied by garrisons. The sultans seldom controlled the hinterland of the cities and were therefore dependent upon trade, tribute, or plunder for supplies. Now, in early 13th century, what happened? The control of Delhi Sultan rarely went beyond the fortified towns occupied by garrisons. Now, what is garrisons? Now, garrisons means a fortified settlement with towns. And what is the meaning of hinterland? Hinterland means the lands adjacent to the city or port that supply it with goods or services. Now, here in early 13th century, the control of Delhi Sultan rarely went beyond heavily fortified towns occupied by the garrisons. For suppose now this so for suppose now this is a place where Sultan ruled. Garrisons means what? His soldiers are being appointed here uh, to rule that this thing or to look after that particular area. That means this is a garrison town which is controlled by the soldiers. And what is the meaning of the hinterland? Hinterland means what? The neighboring cities to the garrison towns. So what happened at that time? It was very difficult to rule on the hinterlands. So what happened? The king has to be depend on for money. They have to be dependent upon trade, tribute, or plunder for supplies. Now, controlling the garrison town in distant Bengal and Sindh from Delhi was extremely difficult. So they were having huge kingdom, and it was at that time it was very difficult to rule over this so huge kingdom because there was a lack of communication, right? Rebellion, war, even bad weather could snap fragile communication routes. Delhi authorities were also challenged by Mongol invasions from Afghanistan and by governors who rebelled at any sign of Sultan's weaknesses. The Sultanate barely survived these challenges. Now, what were the challenges? Rebellion, war, and even bad weather. These were the challenges the sultans used to face at that time. And barely means not much more people or not much more sultans survived at this. They have to leave their kingdom for on that basis. Okay, now for example, when this the sultans barely survived the challenges. Okay, it's consolidation means when this gained the power. A consolidation occurred during the reign of Ghiyazuddin Balban. At the time of the ruling period of Ghiyazuddin Balban, he did the consolidation. That means he strengthened his kingdom. And who strengthened the kingdom? Ghiyazuddin Balban. He gave the power, or he did many changes in his kingdom, due to which the problem of garrison towns and the hinterland was solved. Okay, so Ghiyazuddin Balban had and further expansion under the Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Taghlaq. Again, it was again expanded in the reign of Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad Taghlaq. The first set of campaigns along the interior frontier of Sultanate aimed at consolidating the hinterland. The first set of campaign along the internal frontier of the Sultanate aimed at consolidating hinterland means to increase the power of hinterland, okay, of the garrison towns. During these campaigns, forests were cleared. Now, how to control? Now I have told you. See, now I have told you. Suppose now this is a garrison towns and soldiers are appointed here to rule, and these are the hinterland means the neighboring or the nearby cities, we'll say. If a king wants to rule on this which is not in his kingdom, these cities are not in his kingdom, so he has to be dependent for the trade, or for everything, or the port, he has to be dependent on the other kingdom. So what happened at the time of Ghiyazuddin Balban and Alauddin Khilji, Muhammad Tughlaq's period, they started a campaign against the internal frontier, how to control over the hinterland. This was the main object, how to control over the hinterland, so it will be easy for them to rule. Okay, so what they did, the first set of a campaign along the internal frontier of sultanate aimed at consolidating the hinterlands of garrison towns. Okay, during this campaign forests were cleared in the Ganga Yamuna Doab, and the hunters, gatherers, pastoralites expelled from their habitat. What they did, they cleared all the forests, and what happened? The hunters, gatherer, pastoralists expelled from their habitat. These lands were given to the peasant, and to whom the lands were given? They were given to the peasants, that means the farmers, for the agriculture, and agriculture was encouraged. New forests, garrison towns, and towns were established to protect trade routes and to promote regional trade. This expanded their kingdom. And new garrison towns means, I have told you, the towns which are having soldiers, which are completely protected by the soldiers. So new fortresses were built, garrison towns were established to protect trade routes and to promote regional trade. Okay, the second expansion occurred along the external frontier. Now this was happening with the internal frontier. Now what about external? This was happening within the kingdom. Internal frontier means within the kingdom. What about the expansion of kingdom? How they moved outside their kingdom? Okay, the second expansion occurred along the external frontier of sultanate. Military expansions in the southern India started during the reign of Alauddin Khilji and culminated with the Muhammad Tughlaq. In their campaigns, Sultan armies captured elephants, horses, and slaves and carried away precious metals. By the end of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign, 150 years after somewhat humble beginnings, the armies of the Delhi Sultans had marched across a large part of subcontinent. They had defeated rival armies and seized cities. The Sultanate collected taxes from the peasantry and dispensed justice in its realm. But how complete and effective was its control over such a vast territory? Now understand here, dear children, what had happened during the reign of Alauddin Khilji. He had set up a military expedition. He had sent his army outside his kingdom so that he can capture the other territories also. So at that time, at the reign of Alauddin Khilji, and they culminated with Muhammad Tughlaq. In their campaigns, Sultanate armies captured elephants, horses, slaves, and they carried away precious metals. Okay, this was done by the end of Muhammad Tughlaq's reign. So that means in 150 years, the army of Delhi has reached over the large portion of the country, right? So it was not easy to control that huge army, barabar hai na? So the armies of the Delhi Sultanate had marched across a large part of the subcontinent. They had defeated rival armies and seized cities. They had defeated very huge cities. They had defeated rival armies, and also they have controlled over huge cities. Then what happened? The Sultanate collected taxes from the peasantry, and dispensed justice in its realm. But it was not easy to control a huge, for one person it was not easy to control this huge kingdom. So what do you think, dear children? Was it easy? How it was, what to say, challenging for a ruler to control this vast territory? Was the kingdom complete and effective? Okay, now dear children, in this map we can see that Alauddin Khilji's campaign into South India. He started from Delhi. See, from Delhi here he came in 1299. He started to Gujarat. Again he ruled, came to Chittor, Devgiri, Ranthambore, Kara. These all cities, these all main kingdoms in the subcontinent he conquered. So it was not easy for him to sit here and rule over such a vast empire. So now this was a challenge for him, and so many kingdoms, many kings were changed at that time. Understood, dear children? For one person, because only for one person it was very difficult to rule over the country, so easily they were defeated also. So this is what we are stopping our first session here, and in the next lesson we will, in the next session we will complete our chapter, that is in part second. Okay, I hope you have understood and learned, enjoyed our today's session. Thank you for watching. Thank you and have a nice day.